Okay, so I figured why not give you guys a couple more examples of the quadratic formula, and actually this one is number 10 in y'all's homework, so I figured I'd just do one that was just to help y'all out, okay? So, and actually I'm going to do 3 different types of problems. This one's actually one of the easier ones to do because everything actually ends up looking quite nice. I'm going to go ahead and label all of my numbers here. Remember, we're going to be using the quadratic formula, so I'm going to have 3 letters going on, A, B, C, right? And it's already in descending order. And everything's already on one side of the equal sign, so I'm good. Everything, I don't have to reorder anything. I'm good, right? So let's remind ourselves on what the quadratic formula is in the first place. Negative b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a, okay? And let's go ahead and replace everything we know. So x equals, well, negative, my b's a 2, okay, plus or minus square root of b squared, so that's going to be a 2 squared, so 2, I'm actually put the 2 in parentheses. I want y'all to get in the habit of putting whenever you square something or multiply something even, putting that in parentheses. 2 squared minus 4 times my a, well my a was 12, and then my c was a negative 4, hopefully y'all can see that. I may have to scoot my page over a little bit. That's all under the square root. I just didn't make enough room for my square root, okay? What's it all over? Well, it's all over 2 times my a. And what's my a? Well, my a is a 12, going back to the original part of the problem, right? 2 times 12, and that's on the bottom. Again, a lot of people know how to get to this point right here, right? They're good with this, but they don't know what to do after that. They don't know how to simplify out all these numbers and junk. So let's go ahead and do that. My suggestion for you is, first of all, before you just plug everything in the calculator, let's just plug what's inside the square root. So plug in that 2 squared minus 4 times 12 times negative 4. Plug all that in the calculator and see what number you get, okay? Don't put the square root there yet. Just figure out what's inside, because actually, like I showed y'all before, when you have i's and stuff like that, or sorry, when you have negatives inside of square roots and things like that, you may have to simplify some stuff out. But let's figure out what that, like I said, let's figure out what that number inside the square root is first. And when you type that all in, you should get 196, okay? All over 2 times 12, well, it's 2 times 12, that'd be a 24. Follow me so far? Okay, and now let's actually go ahead and take the square root of 196. Actually, the good part about that is that's a perfect square. If I take the square root of 196, it just ends up being a 14, okay? So let's rewrite that again. X equals negative, still that 2 is still the same, negative 2, we ain't fiddled with that yet, negative 2 plus or minus square root of 196, like I said again, it's just 14 all over the number of the denominator, which is a 24. Now, at this point, you can technically consider that we don't have any square roots anymore, so our job's a lot easier now, because all we got to do is simplify this down one more time. And I'm going to break this apart in two different I don't want to say the word equations, but 2 different numbers, okay? Because one of ours is going to be a plus, right? It's negative 2 plus 14 over 24, and the other one will be a negative 2 minus. I'll show you what I mean. I'm going to write the plus one in red and the minus one in blue. So for example, I'm going to break this apart into 2 different things, because remember that plus or minus means we're going to have 2 different answers, okay? One of them will be negative 2 plus 14 over 24, and the other one will be negative 2, you guessed it, minus 14 over 24, okay? Again, last thing you got to do is just simplify that down one last step further, okay? Just figure out what negative 2 plus 14 over 24 is, okay? So negative 2 plus 14, that'd be the same thing as 14 minus 2, right? Which would be 12 over 24. I'm just reducing down right here. I'm just reducing down. And 12 over 24, well, that's the same thing as what? 1/2, right? So that means one of my answers is going to be 1/2. I'm going to write it down here. I'm circling it over here. So one of my answers is a 1/2. The other answer is, well, whatever that is, negative 2 minus 14 over 24, which I will end up getting, hopefully you can see that right there. I did negative 2 minus 14 in the calculator. I got negative 16, and I divide that by what? Well, I divide that by 24, okay? Divide that by a 24, I will end up getting a lovely decimal, and if I go ahead and do math, enter on there, I'll get negative 2/3, and I'll show you kind of what that would look like if I'm just writing it out by hand. When, like I said, negative 2 minus 14 is negative 16 over 24, and if I like I said, I'm just reducing down here. That would give me a negative 2/3, okay? Now, those are our two answers we have. Again, one of your answers is x equals a half. The other is x equals negative 2/3. I'm going to write that kind of in between here. Hopefully you can see it. I'm kind of having trouble framing this. Negative 2/3 and 1/2. And those are my two answers, okay? Negative 2/3 and a positive 1/2. So what I did there is I just basically plugged everything in. If you want to think of like this in terms of steps, I plugged everything into my quadratic formula. That's step 1. Next up, I kind of tried to simplify down that square root as simply as I could, right? I got square root of 196, and then I said, well, I could take that square root of 196, I get a whole number, and that was 14. And then my last step after that is just to simplify my two answers down, okay? This is one type. Notice also I don't have any negative inside that square root, so I didn't have to worry about any i's. And actually that was also a perfect square, right? Because when I took the square root of that 196, I just got a 14, okay? So let's go ahead and do another one. Except this one is, I'm not going to give you a perfect square. And actually the next one I'm going to give you is going to be number 12. And let's go ahead and remind ourselves on what number 12 in the homework is, okay? Number 12 in the homework is, x squared plus 3x plus 6 equals 0. So x squared plus 3x plus 6 equals 0. Let me double check. Yep. All right. Cool. Let's, again, everything's on one side of the equation, so we ain't going to worry about moving stuff over. Now my a, what's my a? What's the number from the x squared? A 1. So it's like my a is a 1. My b would be a 3, and last but not least, my c would be a 6. My c would be a 6, okay? So I'm not going to remind ourselves of the quadratic formula again. If you want to remind yourself of it, that's it right there. Negative b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. I'm going to plug everything into that, okay? So x equals a negative b, well, negative b is negative 3, plus or minus, move this over just a bit, plus or minus square root of, give me enough room, b squared, again, b is also 3, so 3 squared minus 4 times my a. Well, again, remember, that little is when I don't have anything in front of my variable, right? It's always like a little imaginary 1. So 4 times a 1, that's my a, times my c. Well, my c is a 6, a positive 6. Okay, times a 6. All right. All over what? Well, it's all over 2 times my a, which my a is what? A 1. 2 times a 1, and on the bottom in the denominator, okay? Just like last time, I'm going to tell you, let's just do what's underneath the square root first, okay? Before we start thinking too far ahead, let's just figure out what's inside the square root, because that's where the most junk is going on. That's where the most stuff's happening, okay? So let's go ahead and figure out what's going on. All right, I'm going to drop some stuff down. I'm going to drop that negative 3 down, and I'm going to figure out what's inside that square root, plus or minus square root of whatever I get. I'm going to go into to ask you, well, what's 2 times 1 on the bottom? Well, 2 times 1 is just 2, okay? Just simplifying stuff down here. And then I'm going to figure out what that junk is in the calculator. Again, I'm going to do it right here for you. 3 squared minus 4 times 1 times a 6. Enter on that is a negative 15. Okay, we got to be careful with this because we have a negative where? We have a negative inside that square root. And if you remember, what I talked about is when you have that negative inside of a square root, what letter are we going to have to be dealing with? We're going to be dealing with letter I, right? Because remember, we have a negative inside of a square root. We're going to have an imaginary number going on. So I'm going to go ahead and drop some junk down. Negative 3 plus or minus. Well, again, like I said, I got a negative out there, so I'm going to pull that negative. I'm actually going to write that in, denote that in green. Hopefully you can see that green. Plus or minus I square root of 15. Okay, all over what? Well, all over 2. Now, at this point, you should be thinking to yourself, can I reduce this down any further? Because you have that square root of 15 right there. Now, if I do the tree, I'm going to actually go and move this thing over just a little bit right here. I'm going to try to think to myself, well, 15, can I break that down into anything? Well, I can break that down into what? Well, 5 times 3 is 15, right? But 5 can't break down any further, right, because it's a prime number. And 3 can't break down any further because it's also a prime number. So when you can't break anything down, you don't even need to do this tree thing. You're good. Your answer is what I'm about to circle in red. Your answer would be this. Now, I said answer. I should have said answers. Well, why should I have said answers? Well, because I have a plus or a minus sign right in between. So one of your answers, you don't have to write it out twice, but I'm just saying that you need to get into the habit of thinking to yourself, even though I'm only writing one thing, technically that plus or minus means I have 2 answers, right? So this would be your final answer right here, okay? So remember, when we have a negative inside of a square root, we're always going to pull out an I, okay? Okay, that's one with an imaginary number. Now let's do one where you have to actually do a bit of everything, where you have an imaginary number and you also have a like you have to reduce down what's inside the square root using that tree. Remember, we didn't have to do it for this one because, well, 15, you couldn't break that down into anything simpler, right? So let's do a different one. Now, this one's not going to be in your homework. The one I did before was number 10, and this one right here was number 12. But this next one is not in your homework, but I want you to write down somewhere, maybe in your notes or somewhere if you're watching this video, okay? So let's do another one. And this one is going to have a little bit of everything happening in it. Let's do this one. It's going to have some big numbers going on, so let's prepare ourselves. We're going to have a 4x squared minus 32x plus an 81 equals 0. Okay, so with this one, let's go ahead and label everything. Thankfully, like I said last time, everything's in descending order. And everything is on one side of the equal sign, right? So let's go ahead and label everything. A is a 4, my B is a negative 32, right? And my C is that 81, that positive 81 out back, okay? All right, now let's go ahead and plug everything in. Again, I'm not going to rewrite the formula over and over again, but you should know it by now. Negative B plus or minus B squared minus 4AC over 2A. You should have it in your notes somewhere. All right, so negative B, what's my B? Well, my B's already a negative 32, so you can already go ahead and tell I should have I will end up having a positive 32 out front, but I'm going to write it like this so you don't get confused on why I'm getting ready to switch that sign to a positive. But I want y'all to see that it will switch to a positive. Square root of, I have to kind of make a lot of room for this because it's going to be big. All right, B squared, well, my B is, again, like I said, a negative 32, so negative 32 squared. 32 squared minus 4 times my A. Well, my A, looking back at my equation right here, my A was a 4. So that's going to go inside parentheses, 4 times 4, and then times my C, which was an 81. And again, I'm going to have to make a little bit more room here, which is quite all right. All right, so my square is going to have to extend all the way out there. All right. Okay, so that's all inside the square root. And what's it all under? Well, it's all under 2a. Let's remind ourselves, let's back at our equation all the way back here. 2 times our a, well, our a was a 4, so on the bottom be 2 times a 4. 2 times a 4. Again, a lot of people get to this point and they get kind of overwhelmed with all these numbers going on, but that's what I'm here for, all right? We're going to kind of reduce some junk down. So, well, first of all, remember what I said before. Let's try to figure out what's inside that square root. Let's try to figure out what that number is inside the square root. So plug in negative 32 squared minus 4 times 81. So I'm going to go ahead and plug it in just as I see it. And I put that negative in parentheses because I think a lot of people aren't doing that, and I want to make sure I emphasize that you do need to do that. So all I'm doing is putting in the calculator what I see in parentheses, okay? All right, let's double check. I'm just double checking, make sure I typed in it right. Looks good to me. I'm going to hit enter. I get, ooh, negative 272. That's a big one, all right? So let's go ahead and rewrite this thing of what we have. Let me find my black marker. There it is. All right. Now I'm actually going to go ahead and simplify this part because two negatives make a what? 2 negatives make a positive, right? That's going to turn into a positive 32. Again, you don't necessarily have to make that intermediate step. You could have just jumped straight to a positive 32 right there, but I wanted to show you that 2 negatives make a positive. Well, what do we find underneath that square root? Well, calculator, right? We found it was a negative 272. Okay, so we should be thinking to ourselves, when we have a negative, we'll be dealing with an I, but let's not get too ahead of ourselves. And on the bottom, 2 times 4 is an 8. Okay, all right, so let's think about this for just a second. Let's go ahead and just write out what we got. And remember, when we have a negative inside a square root, what do we have to break out? Well, we got to pull out a I, right? We got to write an I out front. And hopefully you can see that poor green marker is dying. And you can 272 inside all over 8. I'm just rewriting some things. Again, you can kind of skip steps here and there once you get used to doing it. But for now, I'm not skipping any steps. Now, how to go from here to here? Well, I had a negative inside of the square root, so I literally just wrote an I out front, right? And made that a positive 272. Okay, like I said before, when people get to this step, they don't know what to do. So let's show you what to do. Well, just like before, remember when I had that negative 15 inside that square root and I tried to break it down and I couldn't? Well, let's see if we can't break down this 272, okay? So I'm going to write 272 off to the side. We'll try to do my little tree. This is going to be a big tree. All right, now since it's even, I'm going to go ahead and start looking at it, just dividing it by 2, because that's actually the easiest way to do it for me. It'll just be a bit longer. I'll get my calculator right here. 272 divided by 2. Oops, sorry. 272 divided by 2. I'll end up getting a 136. Okay. That's also even, so let's divide that again by a 2. It may help us out. All right, 68, so I can break that down to 68 and 2. 68 is, like I said, also even, so let's break that down again. 68 divided by 2. Okay, I get a 34. And 34 is also even, so I can divide that again by a 2. Okay, 17, finally. Now 17 is a prime, we can't break that number down anymore. So now we broke down this 272 as many ways as we can. Now I'm gonna circle my pairs. Remember what pairs go. Pairs go on the outside right, and singletons stay on the inside. They can't go out of the house on a date, sadly. So let's go ahead and write out what we got. X equals, there, I'm in frame now. X equals a positive 32, plus or minus an I. Don't forget that I. I'm going to actually write the I kind of a little bit out here, because remember, well, looking back at my little tree here, how many 2's could I pull out? Remember, this is where people get lost as well. They see these 4 2's and they want to write 4 2's out front. But how many pairs of 2's did I have? Well, I had one pair of 2 right here. Another pair of 2. So how many pairs of 2's did I have? I had 2 pairs of 2's. So I'm going to write a 2. I'm actually going to have to squeeze it in here. 2 times 2 is going to go out front in front of the I. They're all being multiplied together. And what's the poor little guy left inside? Well, it's a 17 that's left on the inside of the square root, right? Do y'all see that? Remember my factoring tree. That's what I'm going to have left over. All over what? 2. All over my 8, right? All over my 8. Okay, let's keep on simplifying down, because I can do 2 times 2 in my head, pretty much. 2 times 2 is 4, right? So again, let's rewrite everything one more time, and let's see what we have then. 2 times 2 is 4. Make sure you include that I in there. Make sure you include that I in there. Square root of, well, what was inside my square root? Remember, my square root was a 17. All over, I keep on saying 2 times a. Sorry, we already figured that out. All over my 8. Okay, can y'all see that? Yes, it is in frame. Lovely. Now, again, once people get to this point, they think they're done, which technically, I was going to say I'm content with this, but I'm not entirely content with it. I'm not fully happy, because look at these 3 numbers right here. 32, 4, and an 8. All right, look at those 3 numbers right there. We can actually take something out of those 3 numbers right there, 32, 4, and 8. Well, we can actually take a 4 out of everything. We could take a 2, but we can actually take something bigger. Think of like GCF, right? Think of like GCF of those 3 numbers right there, okay? That 32, that 4, and that 8. So I can take a 4 out of everything. X equals, well, 32 divided by 4 would be a, I just want to double check my brain. I think it's 8, right? Yeah, 8, yes, okay, 8. Plus or minus, well, 4 divided by 4 is a 1, so I don't really have to write anything there. So I can just go ahead and skip down to my I squared of 17. Now, most time people don't look at this and they want to say, why didn't I mess with what's inside the square root? You really can't. You can only mess with those 3 numbers right there when you're using the quadratic formula junk down, okay? You can only reduce that part down. All over what? Well, wait a minute. Oh, sorry. No, I'm good. 8 divided by 4 is a 2. Okay, good. I got really worried there. I thought I divided everything by 8. I was like, that's not right. All right, there we go. So I divided everything by 4 because 4 is divisible by everything. Let me scooch this up just a little bit so y'all can see this a little bit better, okay? Okay, so this would be my final answers. Now, why do I say answers? Because of that plus or minus in the middle, okay? You don't have to write it twice, but this is what your final answers would be, okay? So hopefully that makes a little bit more sense. Again, I think pretty much the hardest part for y'all would probably be getting from, y'all can plug everything into the quadratic formulas I have right here, but I think the hardest part is probably knowing what to do after that. So my suggestion is, listen up, is get what's inside the square root. Figure what that number is. If it's got a negative, slap an I out front, and then try to break it down using the tree, okay? If you can. After you do that, remember, pairs go outside. So I put those 2 sets of 2's outside. Singletons stay inside. That 17, she stays inside. Okay, and then I reduce down from there. That's how I got from here to here, because it's like I reduced the GCF down, okay? I'm going to give y'all some more time to practice this on Monday. Not a lot more time, just a little bit, and probably a couple more examples of just dealing with these bit of a heftier problems, okay? So I hope that helped a little bit. Again, these were 3 examples. Go back if you have any questions. Remember, message me. But yeah, that's it. So hopefully that helped a little bit. Thank you.